Hello and welcome to The Way. And I'm joined now in studio by Father Declan Hurley and by Julieann Moran, who have been involved with the Irish Synodal pathway. So we're going to be hearing about what's happening there. But of course, as well, they are involved with the Synod on Synodality. Julieann, of course, you spent time when all the big discussions were happening in Italy and all of that sort of stuff. That's concluded now, the Synod on Synodality. Tell us what the conclusion now means for Ireland and the Irish Synodal pathway.
Yeah, hi Wendy. It was actually great to be there. I was in the Synod Hall when Pope Francis made that announcement to publish the final document from the Synod on Synodality straight away. So I consider that a privilege to have been there. And it has enormous consequences for the church all over the world and Ireland. So I suppose just in a nutshell that the final document now gives us a roadmap and a mindset for how to become a synodal church, a church that listens, a church that discerns by collective wisdom, and a church that does things together, lay, religious and ordained.
Does that make it feel like this wasn't a talking shop? There's actual action points for us to go off on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I'd agree. The big talking point from the end of the Synod on Synodality in Rome was the final document, and it's a kind of a funny title, really, a final document, as if to say, no, that's it. But in fact, actually, it is a roadmap. It's a very, very significant roadmap for the church all around the world in terms of how we can renew ourselves, how we can improve our relationships, how we can improve our way of communicating, so that, going into the future, we as members of the church are actually journeying together in a much more effective way.
And that's probably the best way of summing up, because I know people always think synod and synodality and what does it all mean? But it really is that, where are we going as a church? How are we walking together? And obviously, the Synod on Synodality was this beautiful moment of, wow, the universal church experiences from so many different countries and cultures. And obviously, in Ireland, we're saying, what does that mean in an Irish context? How has it fed into the Irish Synodal pathway and where it goes next?
And I think that'll probably happen in different ways for different dioceses around the country, because one of the things that I found sort of really significant when you look at the way the Synod on Synodality worked, so people from all around the world coming together to discern things together, but the consequences will be different for each person to where they went back to. So depending on where they are in their own journey as a diocese or a parish, they'll find different aspects of the document that's pertinent to them. And we'll do the same here in Ireland. So for argument's sake, a very simple one is there's a clear mandate in the final document for parish pastoral councils. And that's a movement now from not just suggesting that every parish should have a parish council, but actually saying this is becoming an obligation. So that we have some dioceses in Ireland that will have some parish pastoral councils, and we have dioceses who don't. So for them, they'll be looking to the final document saying, right, that's something we need to begin actioning. And then for others, they'll say, okay, well, we have our parish pastoral councils, but are they as effective as they could be? And there's guidance in the final document to say this is how
they can work better and
they'll work
support
better.
people.
Exactly.
But how do you make the connections? Because that's a really good example. Let's say the parish pastoral council is one thing, but youth ministry is another. It's, how do we do this, but we want to involve young people, but we have to attract them into the church in the first place to have them working in this area. There's a lot of interconnectivity, but work that has to be done to make it happen.
There is.
I think what the final document does is that it creates a backdrop for us that is supportive. It means that this is the way forward now, and that there is an invitation in it. I find it's very invitational.
To say, look, you can get on with it.
Yes.
I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah,
Here's a guide for you. Yeah.
It's very invitational. Nobody believes in the type of church that goes out and whips people in and say, you have to come back in, you have to do this. I think we all believe in a church that is invitational, a church that calls. And I think as a church in Ireland, perhaps we've been finding it hard to hear, for our voice to be heard, and because maybe there's a question mark around our authenticity, a question mark around our past, and I think the final document and our synodal pathway in Ireland offers us the opportunity actually to be very honest about all that, and to be able to say to people, if you want to join us on this journey, now's a good moment.
Do you think it's helpful, Father Declan, from a parish priest perspective, in that my gosh, you've so much to do as it is because there's less of you, you're taking on more, that it kind of, you're not having to recreate the wheel here. You can look to this document and say, okay, here's the things
Yeah.
that are doable in my parish or my diocese.
Yeah, totally, totally, Wendy. And so for something like we say, when it comes to renewing a parish pastoral council, you know, that this is the right way to go about it, and you have very clear guidance about this. And you also know that this is now going to be a very important instrument of mission and communication in the parish. And we're not trying to make up what the parish council will be. We're saying this is it.
Here's your blueprint.
Exactly.
And what about from the layperson's perspective then, Julieann? What can we take from that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for me, very strongly, like as a lay woman in it, there's clear recommendations there as well to ensure now that, and women have always been involved in church life and in the mission, I suppose, just in different ways. So but for me now, I would see clear guidance that we just need to maybe check in on ourselves, that as a church, when we're proceeding with a project or a ministry or a parish renewal, that there's clearly women are not just visible, but seen, heard, involved, taking responsibility for aspects of ministries or programs, so that there's a more balanced idea of what it means to be a lay person involved in the life and mission of the church. That you don't need to be ordained to take responsibility for aspects of the life and mission of the church, but that maybe we haven't been as good at encouraging women to the forefront of that. We have done in terms of schools, I would say, all of our teachers in Catholic schools, women are the larger congregation at masses on Sundays, but in terms of governance and those other responsibilities, that type of input.
Isn't that a two-way street though, in that, maybe it's particular generations or just what people are used to, is that we as lay people have to accept, if this walking together is, well, we have to take up the roles and we have to take up to offer our time and offer our gifts, and you can't kind of push everything back on the priest.
No, that's true.
So we have a responsibility ourselves as well.
And I suppose one of my bugbears is I do get a little bit frustrated sometimes when you're out in parish and you're meeting all these wonderful people. I suppose it's just sad sometimes to hear men and women saying they don't feel good enough to be taking on some of these responsibilities, and I think we need to do a lot of work there to say, look, we're all.
I think for me, I think one of the most important things coming from this is it's not that we want to reinforce on people a burden of responsibility, saying, okay, come on, now you're responsible. I don't think it's actually about giving confidence to people,
with their gifts, whatever they may be.
Exactly, and so it's about sharing responsibility, but people can only share responsibility when they feel confident to do it. And so therefore, how do we give people that confidence? Well, I suppose we have to kind of, in some way, make them aware of the gifts of the Spirit that they possess. But we also have to create the context for them where they can express that. And maybe we've been a bit poor on that in Ireland. And given maybe our culture as well, people have maybe lost confidence when it comes to being public about their faith and public about their participation in the church. And again, we can do something now maybe to create the context where they can just be a bit more confident in their faith, because confidence will then lead to mission.
Yeah. And I think people can never underestimate how incredible the different gifts are. I'm thinking of a recent thing we did in our own parish with children's ministry, and you'd one lady who does something I could never do. She made amazing costumes for celebrating St. Bridget. Another who was great at kind of directing the kids. People, but they don't often think how this gift could be used in a different way, and it's so different depending on.
That's so true.
On who you are.
It is one of the loveliest things. So in more recent months, we were rolling out leadership training for a synodal church as part of the ongoing process. And just to describe one component on that program is where we invite people to explore their own personal mission within the overall mission that God calls us to. And it's a beautiful exercise, but I've never seen so many people struggle. It's very simple. It's inviting people to write down 10 characteristics about themselves that they really.
But if you ask me to write it about you, I find it easy. But writing about myself is very different.
And then writing down 10 things that that you're gifted at and that you love to do, that kind of brings energy. And then the third part was inviting people to say, look, put down 5 sort of dreams that you have for the world that you'd love to see. Now, people are well able to do that in the 5th one, but talking about the good qualities that they have and the things they like to do, much more difficult. And then just in crafting that, realizing that you have all of these amazing skills and gifts that have been given to you by God, and you might not be using them in your ministry. You might not be using them in if you're on mission, that you're using, for argument's sake, like somebody could be so gifted in terms of music, but isn't involved in choir or music ministry, because maybe they think, oh, well, I never considered that as my gift, and they're doing something else that maybe isn't their forte, that they're struggling with. So it's about opening up that giftedness in us all as well.
It's really that thing of, if only we could see ourselves the way God sees us.
Oh yeah,
that would change our whole outlook.
Yeah.
Just wanting to ask you both, I know for the Irish Synodal pathway, there's kind of some core themes that emerged, I think 17 of them. Is there ones that you think there's going to be particular focus on, or have you got kind of favourites that you think we should be putting our time and effort into?
Yeah, I think this particular phase of our synodal pathway, we are revisiting those themes, but it's not a voting exercise to say this is my favourite or
This is the top 5, yeah.
No, this now is about a really a deepening, a deeper discernment, a proper discernment. I think perhaps the first time it was really more of a listening process than a discernment process, but now we really have to discern. And more than just choosing, our top 3, it's about trying to hear what is God saying to us in these themes that have emerged. Certainly for me, I see things like, the burden of the past is coming through, in a lot of those themes. And I think that's something we have to be
Acknowledging,
honest. We have to be honest about, But also then that theme of co-responsibility, how we share, the mission of the church responsibly with one another, that's coming through as well. And so rather than one particular theme, I see, if you like, priorities emerging that actually help us to address different matters in the life.
And they're all connected, really.
All connected.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I suppose to give a bit of clarity around is, so right now we're having these conversations in diocese again to revisit, as Father Declan says, to revisit all of the themes that seemed really important for the Universal Synod. So between sort of October 21 and October 24, these were all of the themes that we heard that people felt were important to them. That was fine. Now, as we say, it's about finding priorities to act on, priorities for mission, priorities for action. But we can't just say, well, look, we're going to pick this theme this year and that theme next year. So it's maybe some of the themes work well together to become a priority. So another sense of that is one of the ones that I might like to see is, instead of seeing things in isolation, so, ordained ministry and talking about ministries for women, why can't we have a priority that's looking at ministry and saying, what is God calling us to do in terms of ministry in Ireland? Ordained ministry, lay ministries, new ministries. Maybe there's programs that need to be put in place that elevate some of the ministries that we have that are mandated, but maybe not given the same credibility as ordained ministries. And I'd love to see maybe something like that. And I think for me, that another one that captures a lot is that sense of belonging. Way back in our national census, there was that line that says, those who feel at home in the church feel the absence of those who don't. And that resonated through the Continental Assembly and the Universal. Maybe that's a priority.
That feeling of, I'm home.
Welcome and hospitality. And even though hospitality and welcome weren't themes, maybe they become priorities for us. So it's that digging deeper to see, what is God actually pointing us to? Saying, look here, I'm doing something new here. And we need to see it and act on it.
Well, thank you both for that reflection and update in terms of what's happening for the Irish Synodal pathway. It's always great to have you, and always great to have you with us as well. And you can get updates on all that's going on with the Irish Synodal pathway here at The Way. Thanks to Julieann Moran and Father Declan Hurley.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Pleasure.